Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Rick Alexander, and I host all of the shows on the Lionheart Radio channel, including Morning Coffee, the Lionheart Radio Sideshow, and this show, Lionheart Radio, which is a long form interview, which I don't need to explain to you because you guys are listening. If you are listening to this for the first time, though, check it out. We drop a new show Monday through Friday. Most of them are short, 10 minutes or less. We talk about some aspect of lifestyle, motivation, performance psychology in those areas. So if you're interested in those, go check out Morning Coffee. Also, if you are somebody who is kind of struggling with your finding your spot in the world, that is what I've dedicated my last couple years to figuring out how to solve. And so one of the courses that I've launched is called the Clarity Academy. And the point of this course is to figure out who you really are and what you really want for your life. And I think that that's an area that is vastly underserved, especially in formal education. So if you find that you're a little bit lost and you're not exactly sure what you're passionate about or who you want to be, and you want to do some of this more emotional deep work, then hit me up at Rick Alexander _ or at Lionheart Radio on Instagram. Slip yourself into my DMs and we'll talk about whether the course is good for you or not. And if it's not, I will happily send you on your way. But I do believe that this work, a lot of people could benefit from doing a lot of this emotional deep work and just figuring out more about themselves, to be honest, because so much of our lives happens outside of our own awareness. Also, getting into today's show, I'm chatting with Nathan Holliday. He is an entrepreneur, but we'll get into what he does as far as a business at the end of the show. But the big thing that I really took away from this episode was his view on life and productivity and entrepreneurship. And I think those are the things that you'll really enjoy out of this show. We talk a lot about Stoicism. You know, at the time of this recording, there were some things I wasn't super aware of, like the Pomodoros for productivity and things. I've actually gone back through and implemented a ton of this information in my own life. I've used the Pomodoro technique for productivity. He goes over some journaling exercises, all of which I've implemented in my life. And I really am finding that they make a big difference, not only with how I'm creating content, but also just my day-to-day like reflection on how my life is going. And so we'll get into all of that, but I would say listen to this episode because there's a lot that you will glean from it just if you think about his perspective on how he's looking at life and all of these different facets of it. And I think that that's where the gold is in this episode. So this one is with Nathan Holliday. I hope you guys enjoy it. Without further ado, on to the show. All right, Nathan Holliday, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So we were connected by a mutual contact, mutual friend, and she left me a bunch of notes that were like pretty cool on our interview. And then I know we had talked pre-show. One of the things I thought was super cool was like the different ways that the different topics that she kind of talked that we should talk about. And one of the things I got out of this was just your approach to entrepreneurship is not exactly what you would see from a lot of people. But I think what's really cool is I think some of the reason I know that is one of the things that Jessica said is that you were in the military, but in your own words, weren't very good at being a soldier. And so you started a few businesses. Is that correct still?
Yeah. I think like I joined the military for adventure to serve my country and everything, but it like I didn't really have a plan. I didn't really know what it was going to be like. And I found out pretty quickly that that route in terms of like conforming was really tough for me. I'm an only child. I kind of grew up that way, and it sort of hit me in the face when I joined the military, and that it feels to me like I have like I just was destined to be an entrepreneur in terms of like going out on my own and doing my own thing.
And have you found that are there like some crossover type things that were beneficial in the military that have served you on the outside, or do you really feel like you've had to rebuild all yourself here?
I think like I learned so much. I mean, when I joined, I had a series of things just kind of battling against the whole authority thing for a few years before I realized that there's a game to play. And like my last couple years in the Army, I really sort of turned it around. I still had a couple problems, but I really made some strides. And the lessons that I've learned in terms of just being able to, suck it up and do the things that you need to do. That was like the real big lesson. And when I left the army, I started coaching fitness, and just kind of went down that path. And yeah, the business side just happened very naturally for me. I kind of knew that that's the direction I was going to go, but it happened really organically over a few years.
Yeah, and we won't spend a ton of time on this area, but I think one thing that's cool is like in entrepreneurship, you do get the freedom, and there's really nobody telling you what to do. However, one of the things that like became really clear to me is you almost have to self-impose your own structure and discipline around it in order to
Absolutely.
get things done. And you and I were talking a little bit about productivity pre-show, but have you found that it's easier for you to assign a structure to yourself?
Yeah, totally like that. Like, but even with myself, so what's funny is like I assign something to myself, and then I still am like, I try to make like get my way out of it or something, So I found that for me, like routines over the years, routines and rituals and habits, have just played huge. Like I need that stuff, but it's almost like it has to be self-inflicted. Like I need to be self-motivated to do it. Same thing with learning, right? When I was in high school, I was the worst student. Like I did not care. I read a lot. Like I read a lot of fiction and a lot of stuff, and I was interested in what I was interested in, but by no means a good student. And now though, like years and years later, when it's not imposed on me, I love learning. I'm like obsessively learning. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are like that. Like it's like you give yourself freedom, and now when you're curious about things and you go down these paths, the whole world opens up, and it's like, oh, here is actual freedom. Like to be to have autonomy over your own learning and over your own life, and not be under the constraints of any sort of external thing. And like I was just driving home the other day. I think about it all the time because sometimes after the end of a workday, I'm just kind of going home, and I'm in a sea of cars, a complete sea of cars, all these cars going up. It's like 5 p.m. or whatever, and I'm just going home because that's the time that it just happened to be that that's when I was leaving.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself that every single person, I mean, 99% of people, a huge amount of people, they live under the confines of a set schedule. And it's a completely different life, 100% different life when you're in this sort of the routines that are put upon you, as opposed to the routines that you create with intention.
Yeah, in different life, as in, so I'm interested in see what you mean by different life. Like one of the things I've noticed in myself personally is like, um, I'm not as stressed actually, even though it's pretty stressful because you have to make sure that you get stuff done. I'm not as stressed because I feel like there's zero anxiety of like you have to be here at this time.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how much shoving who I am into that box actually affected me. And I wonder if that's the case with a lot more people. I just happen to, feel called to the entrepreneurship life. But I wonder how many people are sort of shoving their psyche into a cubicle it doesn't belong. But because it's been life for so long, they don't necessarily understand how it affects them differently. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
totally. It's like when people are working, they're working, they're doing their job, they're trading time for money, and they're doing their job in order to now have the weekend and to do the thing. And I think entrepreneurship, when you do it right, the money is a byproduct of the passion. It's a byproduct of like the things that pull you, that you do with extreme intention and focus because you really do enjoy it. And when you start moving down that path, it's inevitably the money comes and you get sucked into your work. And of course there are employees that have that same thing, like knowledge workers that work in something and they're totally involved, and that's a different thing. But I think majority of classic employee mindset is just literally, let me do my work, check the boxes off, and then go and enjoy my free time.
Hmm. And I think what's interesting is that sounds appealing. Even me as an entrepreneur, like that
Right.
sounds appealing.
Right, right.
But the price you pay for settling for a life that you might not necessarily want, is just not worth it to me. At least that's what I found.
Yeah, like it's funny because the security of having, so when I was in the military, it's like the ultimate security, right? Like you're definitely gonna, you can't really get
Right.
fired.
Right.
You're like locked in. You like, no matter what, you're gonna have a house, you're gonna have somewhere to sleep, you're gonna have food, you're gonna do, it's just total security. And when I left, that totally went away. And so it was like a struggle of multiple years of sort of dealing with a level of stress that was like an anxiety about not the unknown in the future.
Hmm.
And that's one reason why I did naturally go down this sort of this philosophical bent, because you're kind of continuously dealing with stress and stuff. And I didn't make hardly any money for years and years. Like I'm talking like under $10,000 a month, living ultra frugal. I lived in a van behind my gym for like 2 years. Like literally, it was kind of next to this water plant. So people always joke that it was like the van down by the river or whatever. But
Yeah.
it was like literally living in this van, dropping down expenses so that I could, be down this entrepreneurial path. And it required sort of a philosophical outlook. Otherwise, it's like, what do you do? Like, how do you just would quit this thing and just go get a job?
Right, because yeah, it just doesn't make sense unless you
Right.
can like rationalize it in your worldview somehow.
Totally.
So okay, so this is really interesting, and I didn't necessarily see the conversation going this way, but a lot of people that I talk to, that I interact with outside of the show, around the show though, they are sort of. It seems like there's like a junction that we're in right now where people are sort of at this tipping point, and there's a lot of people that are considering jumping into something else, maybe entrepreneurship, or just maybe trying to find something that fulfills them a little more than life is right now. And so I'm curious with you, have you always been so introspective that you started looking for your own answers?
In a way, like I'm an information hoarder. Like I don't have I'm a sort of I don't like to use the word minimalist because of how much it's everywhere and like it bothers me. But there's like physical objects I don't really have a lot of, but information I've always hoarded. Like I've always pulled in information looking for answers, like looking for things. I want to find the best ways to do different things. Like I got into fitness, and that the whole fitness, the wave of CrossFit all pulled me in from the functional, the pragmatic idea of how effective this stuff is.
Hmm.
And I've really gone down that way in all areas. And when it comes to philosophy, I was immediately drawn to Stoic philosophy because of that pragmatic idea of like this is a simple way of thinking that can kind of adjust and change how you view the world and interact with the world just through a few mindsets. And when you think about things in a certain way, it sort of alleviates a lot of the things that come as a byproduct.
Hmm. So, I mean, I'm quite familiar with Stoicism, and that's another thing that right now is sort of, I don't know, it's
Hot
sort of
topic.
yeah, it's a hot topic. It's a little, kind of a buzzword. And one thing I like about Stoicism, especially when you, in comparison to other world beliefs, like a lot of like religious beliefs or whatever, a lot of religious beliefs tell you sort of how to prepare for what's next. What I like about Stoicism and Buddhism a little bit is that they really prepare you how to be right here, like how to deal with the things that are happening right now. Have you found that to be the case?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like uh, I've gone through so many hard times where like, depressed about something, or like feeling like I'm not, what am I doing? Like all those sorts of things that we all feel. And I'll open up meditations, and I just kind of read through, and it just immediately puts me at ease, right? Just this idea that we only have control over ourselves, and we don't necessarily need to like we don't need to worry about all these external things. And if we focus on being a good person, we focus on the moments, we focus on our actions, the way we think, when we focus on those things, satisfaction and fulfillment come automatically. And it like goes back to that whole idea of chasing money. When you can be passionate and in the moment and doing what you're doing, the outside melts away. And what's funny, when that happens, external measures of success come with it, right? Like it's like this weird thing when you let go. It's like suddenly the success from the outside world comes more readily.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting, and it's weird how like that's just a life thing, right? Like you sometimes you have to try less to be more
Oh,
effective.
yeah.
It's like this cosmic irony that we're all kind of dealing with.
It's like grabbing a fish, right? Like if you're gonna grab a fish and you grab it really hard, what's gonna happen? It's just gonna shoot out harder, like a bar of soap. But if we just grasp it and let it be, it's easier. Fish might be flopping around,
Yeah.
actually.
Well, that's a good one. I was thinking of golf. Like anyone that like tries harder in golf to hit the ball further knows that you just send it in the wrong direction.
Totally.
Like the harder you try,
Or swimming.
Right. Or Olympic weightlifting. We could do could do this for a while. All right. So I think I want to dive into sort of the crossover because I understand Stoic philosophy for life. I'd love to get into how it's helped you kind of throughout your own projects as an entrepreneur and stuff. But just so we can back up a little bit, do you want to talk about like what Stoic? We jumped into you talked about meditations and stuff already, and some people might not even be familiar with Marcus Aurelius.
For sure.
Do you want to start with like what like let's define Stoicism, or I guess just based on your sort of definition of it.
Yeah, so like there are three primary people when it comes to Stoicism, like three big names, and it's Seneca, who wrote a bunch of letters, Epictetus, who wrote like a little manual, and then we have Marcus Aurelius, who wrote Meditations, which was a journal. And the thing that's funny is Epictetus was a slave, and Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome. And so the idea is that it spans all levels of humanity. And really, what Stoicism is it's just a practical philosophy on living a good life and being able to manage yourself through just a couple core concepts. And I think like the big ones are like being pragmatic, taking things as they are, not worrying so much about the outside world. And then the second big area would be a cultivation of like attention, clarity, self-honesty, and awareness. And like, so that kind of encapsulates Stoicism in these like single words. But it's definitely changed my life in the way that I've developed a habit from meditations, which is keeping my own journal. We can talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell.
Okay, cool. So I think one thing that you mentioned there was the polarity between Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. Like the one thing that's really cool, like Marcus Aurelius Meditations, that was just his journal. So what's cool about that, just for the listeners, is that this is somebody who was the most powerful person in the world, literally just observing his own life and writing about it, and then it somehow has like a lot of relevance to our life today, which is
Yeah,
really crazy.
and kind of expanding on that, like to give perspective, there's nobody in the world today that has as much power as Marcus Aurelius had. Like of the known world, totally in charge. He could do whatever he wanted to do, totally anything he wanted to do, and he was in power for about 20 years, 19 years, and his journal, like he wrote it in primarily in times of war. So like if you read his stuff, it's like he's going through some extreme stuff and he's dealing with all sorts of things, and he's writing to himself, basically coaching himself on how to be a better person. So he studied, the philosophy of the time, and now he's applying Stoicism practically in a real world example. And one of the most intriguing things is that journal, he made it clear that he did not want it pushed anyway. It was like his private journal was supposed to be destroyed, and then somebody who, some bookkeeper or whatever, who had an idea that this was a gold mine, took it and then has made it into this book. But when you read this book, it's the most powerful person in the world coaching himself on how to be a better person. And it's like so insightful, full of just amazing stuff. And it's like motivating. If this guy can do this, then I mean, I can be a little bit of a better person too. I can work on myself, be honest with myself. When I have some little nagging thing inside of me and I'm like bitter or resentful about something, I can let that actually come to the surface, and like I can deal with it without having to try to like push it off to the side. I can be honest with myself. And that's a really big thing, is just the example that meditations offers in terms of like its real world value.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. There's like almost no more gnarly of an arena to stress test an idea.
Right.
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 And I've been doing a lot of research. I mean, just for my newest book, I'm writing about meaning, so I'm sort of interviewing and doing deep dives into all these different religious structures and trying to distill like where they really like are able to help people and and help people find meaning in their own lives. One of the the conclusions I've come to is that in order for a worldview to really be productive, it needs to be universally applicable. So it should be, a rich white guy in California should, or Wall Street should be able to apply the same thing to the refugee in Syria in order for it to be like a truly like well-rounded worldview. So I like that Stoicism just the people that like kind of created the philosophy, or that the philosophy is created after, uh, they were inherently from such different spectrums.
Totally.
So you know
Yeah.
that it's true, I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
It works. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you started getting into Stoicism, and was that, did you get into it based off like, I just need more answers in life, or what did that progression look like?
Yeah, it was sort of this happened probably 2013 or so, where I think we all have a tendency, everybody kind of goes in and out of different modes, and we go through different phases and stuff. And I was going through sort of this frugality and simplicity phase. And I read something about meditation, so I picked up a copy and I listened to it. That was the first way. And I listened to like the old version. It was like, old English or something. It was
Mm.
kind of to follow. And I just listened to it. I'm like, okay, it's pretty good. And then I got a copy of Hayes has a translation, and I read that, and that one really sort of impacted me. It was intriguing, the first one. Then I read the this one that's more modernized, and then it just sort of it took a forefront in my way of dealing with stress and dealing with people, right? Like the idea that people, I mean, people are people, and all you can really do is be a good example. And like there's no need to get like so angry about something or be so emotional. Either way, somebody gives you a bunch of praise or they talk crap about you or whatever. It's all pretty much the same, and we just have this internal environment. And anytime I would find myself being pulled and owning a business, especially like, so I own a gym, and the gym business, like it is personal. And sometimes like, people quit or they leave, or, you get an email about something, and it's like, for a few years, I was just, just pulled in all directions. My emotional strings just like getting wrenched. And once I started really focusing on Stoic philosophy, that it really changed. And of course, it's not like I don't have anything. It's I'm still getting pulled all the time, but it's like I have this tool belt. I have this like tool chest over here that I can pull from, and it like kind of calms me down and allows me to like focus on what's important.
Interesting. Okay. So that actually sounds like pretty similar to some Buddhist philosophies, just as far as not being so attached to, well, rejection or acceptance, right? Not being too attached to anything. Do you have a practice that allows you to sort of implement these philosophies in your own life? Like, do you just spend time in the morning, or what does that look like?
So the absolute most important thing that I've done is because of meditations is started keeping my own journal. So for years, I'm talking like 10 years or 15 years, like I wanted to keep a journal. I had this idea in my head, and I think a lot of people do. People have like 10 journals, and they're like, there's like 5 pages full. We've all like get motivated about this new journal, and then we go. But for years, I didn't really understand, um like I would start it, and I didn't really know what to write, and I didn't know what to say. But by reading meditations, I was getting an example. And I thought to myself, when I would read meditations, like, okay, well, what is he doing? He's actually, why is he writing? He's not writing for anybody but himself. So he's most likely rereading what he's writing at some point, right? To keep himself sort of involved. He's coaching himself. So from that idea, I finally was able to start keeping a journal. And there's an oscillation that's really important. There's like this sort of routine that happens with the journal that's really important, and it just goes very simply. Every day I write key things of like what happened in the day, but also like what I'm working on, and like things I've been doing well, and like just kind of motivating myself, and I totally forget that I've written any of this down. But at the end of the week, every week, I'll read my past week. And so I go back now and I go through my week, and I've forgotten like 90% of the stuff. And I'll get to the end of my week sometimes, and I'll feel like, man, I'm not doing well. Like it's like things are not going that great. I got a lot of stuff going on. Like it's pretty crazy. I'll read my journal, and I'm like, oh, huh, this is actually really interesting because I've actually done way more than I thought, and I can be reflective in an accurate way. And I can sort of go through and I can find these themes and things that I'm thinking about and need to focus on more as I go through. And that's the way that I've been able to actually make changes in my thinking over the long term, because it's like I'm being reminded constantly. I'm kind of going back, and at the end of the month, I'll read my weekly reviews. And then at the end of the year, I'll read my monthly reviews, right? So it goes through this, and I've been doing this for probably about a year and a half. So I have like a good chunk of stuff to kind of go through, and I can see things, and that's what we're doing when we're thinking about bringing clarity or honesty to ourselves. Man, we're pretty crazy, like people in general. Like we forget a lot of stuff about what we're doing. We don't see our own patterns. We try to start things and fail. We like, I'm going to do this, and we do it for a little while and then stop. And there's like hundreds of these little things going over and over and over. And without writing it down and seeing things, be able to accurately see things, like to me, it's almost that people make change without doing it is like, it's really impressive. Like, how do we do that? We have to remind ourselves. And I think a journal is the best way. Like it's my number one thing. And it's like pretty obvious. People know about journaling, but it's like, man, when I see it in action, I can't believe it. Every single time I write, I'm like, and I'm reading, especially the reading, mostly the reading, I'm shocked. I'm like, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah. Okay. So are you writing insights, or are you writing stream of consciousness style? And the only
Oh,
reason I'm asking is just for people that are listening to this, like the idea of journaling has come up quite a bit in past episodes, just as a way of understanding yourself better, which is essentially what you were alluding to. And so
yes.
does that practice look like just
So my
insights or?
I just pulled it out just to kind of get an like I always brief in the morning talk about like my if my morning routines were good, what I did running through the day broadly, and then okay, like depending on what I'm doing, like I'll if I'm having some sort of struggle, or I feel like I'm not, I'll give myself some like motivational stuff, like just sort of, this is going well, keep the stuff up. Remember to focus on the details. Remember, simplicity is really important. Keep things, don't overwhelm yourself. Remember that the big things are what's important, long-term vision, those sorts of things. So then I go through, when I reread it, I'm like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. So it's like, it's almost just a reminder of the things that I want to remember. By the time I read it again, I've literally forgotten most of it. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good thing that I'm reminded of this thing, because I would have totally forgotten otherwise. And
Mm.
I also keep my training. So I have my journals just black writing, and then all of the workout or training that I do is in red. So I can just kind of go through. I have everything sort of laid out, and I can just stream through my weeks to see globally all the things that I have going on. And then I'll sometimes write like if I go somewhere. So I went to England at the end of last month. So I write, like I just draw the word England big. And so as I'm going through my journal, I can see like these big theme parts of my life, and I can like track out my life from this 30,000 foot view, which is it's just cool. It's just useful.
Yeah, no, I mean, that in itself, that one practice, I think would give you more self awareness than most people have. Because, like you said, we don't even know. I mean, 95% of what a human does actually happens outside of their consciousness. They're not even aware, because we're acting on all these sort of implicit actions that have been put into us through programming or survival mechanisms or psychological coping mechanisms or whatever it is. And so just the fact that you have like some kind of data point to see how you actually are thinking about things is really beneficial. And then the other thing I like about it is it's kind of aspirational, at least in the way that you described it. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but just sort of like by giving yourself little reminders and motivational things, you sort of, you're setting your aim on like how you want to act and how you want to be throughout the rest of the week.
Totally. I'm reminding myself multiple times a week, like, be ego free. Like, remove the ego. Don't even, because I'll feel it bubbling up, right? Like I'll have some sort of thing, and I'll have some experience like in daily life, and I'm like, ooh, that was like kind of weird. Like I thought that I'd been dealing with that stuff, and then I'll write it in my journal, and then it's just is coming back and touching on that thing, on that theme. And it's like it's made me a better person. Like you can really be honest. Nobody's going to read it. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
just for you. And this is something it took me a long time to write things in it that I didn't want to be read by other people. But it's a tool for you, and it's like, don't, if someone takes it, like, who, don't even think about that. Just think about writing out the things that you need and to give you the hits to be as honest as possible, because it's for you. If you're dishonest with yourself, then you're just kind of spinning in that circle.
Yeah, that's a good insight though. I bet I'm because I'm thinking about myself right now. I'm like, do I write shit that I wouldn't want someone else to read? I don't think so. I think maybe yeah, I censor it.
Yeah, I know. I did it for probably a year. Like, and it's like I'll have my hand like with my pen, and I'm like, I'm not sure that I want to write. Okay, and it's like I write it anyway, and it's like when I go back and read it, it's like, ooh, it's just another data point that can help me stay on track.
Hmm. Well, and it helps you not live in, delusionally, right? Because I think a lot of times we tell ourselves, with any situation, be it money, be it fitness, be it whatever, we sort of have a way of telling ourselves that we're maybe further ahead than we actually are.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so if you're very honest with yourself in your journaling practice, I like that because it does give you a better, you can still be aspirational, but it can give you a litmus test about where you're really at in your life.
Yeah, and it's like I have days. It is an objective measurement of my weeks and my, like, I have a tendency to be, I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs in general, there's a tendency to be really hard on yourself, like, to not, you didn't wake up early enough, you didn't do enough work, you didn't stay on track, you didn't do this, you were distracted by these things. At least that's how it is for me. Like, I'm constantly thinking like I'm not doing as well as I should be doing. And then by going through my journal, it's just a reminder of all the good stuff that's happening. And there's visualization involved. So visualization's it's the way our brains work. Like, we work through images. And so as I'm journaling stuff, I'm putting in key images. Like, I can go back when I was in England to see my mom. I have like all of days there, and I have like big chunks of like memories that are sort of encoded, right? So like I'll encode just, like garden with dogs or something, right? Like real brief thing that to me just blows out like a movie of experience and all sorts of stuff from my memories that I can think back to going there. But then when I read it, it's like puts me back in it. I can feel it. And that, I think, like, from a tracking standpoint in your life, it's just like, it's so powerful. Somebody else that reads it, you go ahead and read this, and it's like, okay, garden with dogs, like, what does that mean?
Right.
Right. But when I read it, it's like, boom, all sorts of stuff. I get a cascade of memories. It's just like your own personal movie library.
Yeah. And do you keep that separate from your business life? So one of the things that I've found is, like, as I do my own sort of personal development, but specifically within self-awareness, my business actually gets better. It's like the growth of the business matches my personal growth.
Oh,
And,
for sure.
and so do you I guess are you, when you're journaling, are you like focusing on business things as well? It's sort of all, when you're an entrepreneur, it kind of all becomes one thing, but
Yeah, for me, it's definitely mixed. Like, sometimes a lot of it will be work related stuff. Like, I'm talking about some deal or something that we've been working on, or some new launch that we're doing, and I'm writing all about that because that is the theme of my life in the moment. That is a reflection of what's happening, and that's what I want. I want to be able to look back and be able to track and see how I've evolved, how I've progressed. It's like I look through my journal and I go back, like, 100 or however many pages back, and the journal looks different. The entire way that I'm writing looks different. The way I've structured things looks different. It's an evolution. So at first, you're going to start the process. If somebody's starting their journal process, they get motivated and they get a journal, and it's like, it's going to evolve. There's all these little things that I do. Like, I keep track of my weeks. So I draw the weekly number real big in my weekly review. So like 50, the recent week was the 50th week of the month. And I have 50 written big. So I can go through and scan through and see the 30th week of the year, or the 31st. And that was something that took like 6 months before I thought to do that. And then I started doing it. So I can see this evolution, and every single person's their own journal is going to have its own evolution. It's going to become a tool, right? If we can actually get this habit, right? This is the hardest thing, is like, oh, it's great. That'd be awesome to have this amazing habit, but how do we actually build this habit in and do it? That's the battle, right? I started and stopped journals for years and years, and then by coming around to it enough times, it's stuck, and now it will not never go away. It's like it pulls me every day. I'm like, I like want to do it so I can have this insight. But at first, it's really difficult. It's like starting to work out or doing anything. It's like it's going to take a little while.
And are you journaling at night or in the morning?
Generally, at the end of the day. Sometimes I don't do it every day. Like if I'm real busy, it'll skip a day, and then I just backdate it and I do a review of the previous day real quick. But most of the time in the morning, I don't really have much to say yet, so I'll just do like a quick 2 or 3 sentences, like up, got these things done, headed here to do this, blah blah blah. And then later on in the day, like in the evening, then I'll sort of give a recap. And for me, a lot of it does have to do with work and productivity, like how well I think I'm on top of my stuff. Because when it comes to entrepreneurship, you're in charge of you, and if you don't do anything, no one's going to say good or bad. It's gonna delay in 3 months. You're not going to have any money, So it's like you got to keep yourself on track, and if you fail to do that, it's just on you. And I've done that many times where I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do that. And then I feel the repercussions down the line. So it's really keeping my own structure. And I kind of lost my train of thought what I was saying there, but
Well, yeah. So the way that your journaling sort of goes into your productivity. So that's really interesting too, because you also mentioned your training. You put it all in the same journal, huh?
yeah. And it's a housing of all of the stuff. Oh yeah, that's what it was. The productivity side of sort of tracking, how I feel about the work of my day. And like, to me, being fulfilled, like the feeling of satisfaction at the end of my day, when I get to the end of the day and I've finished my day, I've done my work, and then I can do a complete disconnect. That really only can happen when I feel satisfied with the work that I did. If I don't feel satisfied with like the focus and my ability to plug in and do the things that I know that I should be doing and to do them well, if I don't have that, I'm not going to feel good. And that's a big part of what I track, right? And I know that I have to go to my journal and I'm going to be writing in there. And it's like when it's not a good day, I'm like, I got to get back on my stuff. These routines, it's pretty tough. Things lately haven't been that great. And then I'll like turn it around and be like, but things are getting better. And I'm like, you know what I mean? And it's like you kind of go on this track. And so then when I go back and read it, it's like I can see the turmoil, but then I can see myself, okay, yeah, things are getting better, definitely, and I'm going down the right path.
So you're just kind of always in the journal, like throughout the
Yeah,
day.
I would say I probably spend 15 or well, probably 15 minutes a day.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, but and then you're also like writing in it for work and for training and stuff as well.
Yeah, just like sort of a nightly, usually at night, nightly review.
Oh, okay, okay. So I guess the only reason I'm bringing this up is I think, like you mentioned, it's like how do we make these things habitual, and then how do we make them actually affect our lives so it changes the bottom line, for contentment, well being, or even money in entrepreneurship. So, as far as like the whole intersection of your philosophy with using stoicism and then also your like keen focus on productivity, I'm just the intersection of those things, is the journal the thing for you that's like that where you can take this information and actually make it habitual, or are there other habits that you lean on as well?
Oh man, so there's a framework for my in terms of productivity. There's a framework, and another big contributing factor to my journal is this framework called Getting Things Done. It's by a guy named David Allen, and it's a productivity framework it's an entire system. There's a book. It's called Getting Things Done, and it is the most comprehensive system in existence for productivity, and it's really designed for executives or people that have a lot to do, and it's by no means easy to implement. It took me about 2.5 years of doing it in and out and learning the big concepts. But one of the cornerstone habits in the Getting Things Done framework is a weekly and a monthly review. And in order to do an accurate review, you review your calendar and stuff. But my weekly review, I'm looking at my life too, and that's a big reason why I keep the journal. It's the meditations. Marcus Aurelius sort of pushed me into knowing, understanding that it's really valuable. And then the Getting Things Done actually made it like a pragmatic thing where now it's like, because I'm reading every week, there's a reason behind the thing, and I could kind of convince myself in a logical standpoint why I should be doing this. But the Getting Things Done framework, if anybody's interested in like the big things, there's two concepts, right? There's the weekly review where you're going over all of your key projects, but then you have this idea that completely changed my life. It sounds like kind of like an exaggeration, but it's the ability to capture anything that comes into your world. So you have a capture tool, and that could be a little notebook or whatever. Now, anytime anybody ever says like, "Hey, can you do that thing?" or "Hey, can you get me this?" or whatever, a task that comes down the line, it gets captured in that moment. And when you capture it, nothing then ever slips through the cracks because you have your review process where you go and you review all of the things that you've captured previously. So that's the real like hub of Getting Things Done. And then built around those core ideas are a massive system.
Okay. What I like is, and I'm not sure if I can say this properly, but what I like is when you look, you personally, you're looking at philosophy, and when we originally started talking, my thought was, okay, so you probably memorize some Stoic philosophies, and then you do your best to sort of implement them in your life. What I like is that you're like looking at how these people did things, but then you're emulating how they did them. Like, does that make sense? You're not
Right.
necessarily just like you're not a lot of people want to be told what to do, but you're actually like, no, how did they think? And then let me implement that into my life. And that might be the most valuable part.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason these like people out there have, they have tools, they're doing things, and it's very easy. I'm by no means like I do the same thing as I substitute learning, or I substitute for the action. So I substitute like, let me learn all this stuff and read about journaling and listen to things about journaling and do without actually doing the thing. I did that for years and years. And a couple years ago, the idea of simplicity. So picking the most important things that you could possibly do and just do them. Like, don't overcomplicate it. Don't like try to make it all fancy. Like I used to have morning routines that were like 8 different things, and it's like 5 minutes of this and 5 minutes of that, and like all these different things. And it's like, dude, it's unsustainable. Just pick the biggest thing that you want to be able to do, and then just put your focus on that and do that thing. And journaling, and you look at philosophy and like, what are the ideas behind them, and then let's just do those things, and that's where you actually make progress. I have a thing about like when you see people doing meditation, or they take a picture of themselves meditating or whatever, it most likely it's they're probably their first time meditating, or like one of the first times that it's like they start to meditate and they take a picture of themselves, and then they never do it again until the next time when they take a picture of themselves. And it's like, do the thing that you want to do and don't talk about it at all for like 2 months. And then once you've done it consistently every day and it's like part of who you are, then maybe start to talk about it. But if I came on here and I'm like talking about journaling, and but I really didn't actually keep a journal, I really didn't actually do it, it's like, what, that's meaningless. It's like it should actually be done so you can feel the value and then be confident in recommending it to other people, right?
Right. And I actually think that's maybe one of the biggest problems with the informational age is that we sort of live in this world where it's almost, even though we have access to so much information, we're actually being intellectually lazy because we're always sort of like reposting and not,
For sure.
and not like just sitting down and actually applying anything. Like we're not actually like stress testing our ideas and then saying like, well, okay, this is actually what works. And that's why you have all these like abstract quotes and memes and this motivational culture that doesn't actually help anybody.
Yeah, like social media, we are intensely intellectually lazy, and but it's not anybody's fault. It's like the natural way that the human being goes. Like, how is it faster, easier, more entertaining? And if it is, the majority of people are just going to go that way without even thinking, without even being aware of the thing that's happening, because it's just, if I can do it faster, why not do it faster? If I can do it easier, why not do it easier? But there are lessons to be learned in things that are sometimes hard. And like, by getting perspective of not having social media at all for a while and then coming back and seeing the addiction in yourself and in other people. Like, I have an iPhone, and it's like I try to, grayscale my phone out and not be on internet that much, or not be on social that much. But it doesn't even matter. I still, without even thinking, will pick up my phone and be like toggling to something, and then halfway through the action realize like, oh, we're all the same, right? All this stuff is just leveraging the wiring in our human brain. Like, there's reasons why certain things are appealing, why certain colors and certain things. It's because we have very similar wiring, and other humans have figured out what is going to be really appealing, and then they just do that thing, and then we eat fast food, and we do all sorts of stuff that's not good for us because it feels good in the moment.
Right. And I think some of that just is because we're opportunistic creatures. I mean, we've had to be. So we ate opportunistically, like we just took advantage of the opportunities that presented themselves. The problem is that now we are dealing with like an infinite number of opportunities.
And really, really smart people like building things that are meant to totally leverage our wiring. So it's like, if you take a look at any, just as a side note, any of the social media things, like when you're on Facebook on your phone and you swipe down, that is the reason they did that. There was people that studied it. It's just mimicking slot machine behavior. You pull it down and you're waiting for the next like notice. Ooh, did someone, and you'll see people's behavior. They'll swipe down on their phone over and over and over and over and over, waiting for something to pop up, because it's like it's a technology that is being leveraged, right? Like the technology of the technology of like the way we're wired, built into the things that we're using. And it's like, man, we don't stand a chance. Like, there's nothing we can do.
Right, right. Yeah, no, for real. And so it's especially worse like once you really become aware of how they're like targeting neurotransmitters, and it's just like, hold, I mean, how are you ever going to get past this? Which is kind of my question for you. So you have this self-awareness of um, this is, I'm being targeted in X amount of ways, but then you also like you want to be productive, you want to leverage, social media for business. I would say you almost have to nowadays. And so, how do you go about finding that balance between this world philosophy that was very much generated when there was no technology versus leveraging the things you need and kind of acting within the world now?
So, like, to me, it's all about like clear cuts, And when I was talking about earlier about being satisfied with the work, in order for me to be satisfied, I have to be able to actually work. Like, I have to be able to do it, and I have to be distraction free. Now, sometimes I'm not distraction free, and when I'm not distraction free, I feel it, and I feel dissatisfied with my work. So I'm like, okay, what do I do? Well, I have to sort of disconnect myself. And there's a book, it's probably well known in this crowd, called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And there's a couple other ones, but deep work is really all about just basically getting rid of social media. I can't get rid of it totally because of the job, like what you mentioned, like you can't, right? So I have to be plugged in. But what I can do is I can focus on my work when I'm focusing on my work, and then when I'm off of my computer and off of my phone for the day, it's disconnected. And this is the idea of a daily closeout. So I got this idea from Cal Newport, and I've implemented it into my own life, where when I finish my day, I haven't been great about this, in all transparency. I haven't been great about it lately, but I used to do it all the time. And it's at the end of your day, you just do a closeout. So you close all the loops. You make sure that everything's good. So then you can turn your stuff off. You can shut your computer down and you can be totally disconnected. And now family people, that have kids and stuff, obviously you can't really do that. But it's just about being able to relax and be disconnected when it's appropriate, and then you're connected when it's appropriate, and then not being pulled either way and being like, oh, I wish I was doing that, but while I'm doing this, and then when you're doing the other thing, you wish you were doing the other thing. It's like you have these clear cuts in your day and your life.
Right. So is there anything that you've, I guess, implemented personally over the last few years of your entrepreneurial journey, either philosophically or productivity wise, that has just been like the biggest game changer? And maybe it's the journaling exercise or whatever, but
I mean, it depends on how far someone wants to go down this rabbit hole. If like somebody's really interested in totally overhauling their productive strategies, read the book Getting Things Done. Like that book will completely change your life. If you have a Mac, you can then get the software OmniFocus. OmniFocus is built upon it's built for the Getting Things Done framework. But you have the Getting Things Done, which is like this global one. It's the way that you can structure your life when people give you things. It all goes into projects. So Rick, if we were working together and a bunch of things start coming in, I might tag a bunch of items with your name. And then when I see you, I just pull up your name and I have all of the stuff relevant to you. This is like context. So you have projects and context. But that's on a global. Now, when you look at micro, so I got this whole getting things done thing down after a while, but then I was having a really hard time consistently plugging into my work because of distractions. So I would feel like, oh, I have all this stuff good together. But then when I would go do my work, I'm like on Facebook halfway and I'm kind of like doing this halfway. And I'm like, well, there's got to be a solution. And that solution is basically a microcosm of productivity called the Pomodoro technique, which is very well known within the productivity world. But it's basically you chunk it, and there's a little book on it. It's free. You can just download it. It's a PDF. Just search Pomodoro PDF, and it'll come up. And it's like it's a written totally with the idea of making your work a practice. So you track. Now it gets really kind of crazy, so you don't have to go all the way, but like the highest level of the Pomodoro technique involves tracking interruptions, both internal and external interruptions. So when you have your work for the day, you're like, okay, I'm going to do it's always task based. So like I want to write one chapter, or I want to write 500 words, or I want to do XYZ. Then I start my clock, and all I do for that amount of time, the only thing I can do is that one task. And I get plugged in totally to that task. And if I get an external interruption, so if someone comes knocking on my door, I say, oh, I'm in the middle of a Pomodoro. Some people, they might not know what that means, but I'm just working right now. And then you mark on your paper that you had an external interruption. Now, external interruptions, if you just remove yourself from an environment, they won't be that bad. But internal interruptions, these ones are really insidious. You'll just catch things up in your brain. You'll just immediately go down a line of thinking, and suddenly, like, this thing that you haven't done is the most important thing you can do in the world, and you have to go do it right now. You get like these weird things, and that's an internal interruption. And what you do is you track over time how well you can get work done in that time, and you get better at estimating your time, how long it's going to take to get XYZ amount of work. It's an entire practice, and I've gone in and out of it. I'm not as hard on it as I used to be, but I do go through my phases. But so you have like the GTD global, and then on the actual day-to-day work, you have Pomodoro technique, which is like together those two things. I mean, I'm convinced you cannot get better.
Damn. Okay. I'll link both of those up in the show notes of this episode for people that are listening. So that's super cool, because I'm definitely like, I'm on my own entrepreneurial journey. And I think, a lot of people that listen to this are sort of either, pivoting. Like I said, a lot of the conversations I've had, people are pivoting or have already pivoted. And so one of the things is like, you want to enter into this life where you have more freedom and you have more, self-efficacy and control over what's going on. But at the same time, that comes with a great deal of responsibility and a great opportunity to fuck it up because you have so much free time. Staring at a blank canvas is just such a difficult thing to
Yeah,
contend with.
it's like the gold standard is 8 pomodoros, or 10. The book says 10 pomodoros, but 8 to 10 pomodoros. A pomodoro is a single unit, an unchangeable chunk, an atomic unit of 25 minutes. So you have a 25-minute chunk and then a 5-minute break. So it's always in 30-minute chunks. Every 25 minutes, you get a 5-minute break. Sometimes I skip the breaks if I'm like in flow. And then after 2 hours of that, you get a long break, which is like 30 minutes. And so the ideal would be for you to do 4.5 hours, which is about the creative limit. If you look at throughout history, all of there's a book about routines, how artists work, I think is the book, and it's a listing of all of these artists from throughout history, and pretty much the limit of creative work per day is about 4 hours. After 4 hours of real deep thinking, there will be a fall off. So you might have to then switch to tasks that are more like mundane, that don't require so much thinking. You can get more work done, but 4 hours is about the limit. So 8 to 10 pomodoros. If you can get 8 to 10 pomodoros done per day, that is a productive day. And you could be done, if you start at 8 in the morning, you're done by 12.
Right.
You know, and it's like you just slam through the work and you're now satisfied for your day, and you can relax knowing that your creative energy has been spent well. And anything that you try to do more on top of that usually isn't going to be the best. And over time, you get better. You know, you get better and better at plugging in and working. There's all sorts of little things like with the sound. So the pomodoro, there's a little tomato timer. The pomodoro is Italian for tomato, and so it's the classic tomato timer. And when you turn it on, it clicks. It goes click 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 click. You know, it's like ticking down, and that sound of over time becomes a conditioning tool. So now when you hear the ticking, you're like plugged in really hard, you know, because you've like been working in deep work for so long with the ticking playing, and now when you hear the ticking, it plugs you into work. So there's all this psychology involved too, which is really cool. And again, for some people this might seem way extreme and way overboard, but when I mean, what would you rather do? Work 4 hours really hard and get that done and then have the rest of the day off, or work 8 hours where it just feels like you didn't really do anything for the whole day?
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends if you work for the government or not.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but I completely agree, and that's funny. I will back that up. I haven't obviously like I hadn't wasn't familiar with this system before the interview. Definitely, I'm going to look into it. And I was just telling somebody the other day, like when I was off in Australia writing my book, one of the things I found is like I've got about 4 hours of like
Yeah.
really crushing it, good like deep thinking, and then after that, like I've got to do more mundane tasks.
Yeah, you just gotta let your brain relax, let your mind just totally relax, and it's a big thing with creative stuff. You know, when you're learning math or you're learning like a language, they say that if you simultaneously learn or study music, or vice versa, you know, you mix these things together, you have like this right side and the left side, you learn both of them faster because you're getting these different areas of the brain working, and they're sort of supporting each other. And when you work for 4 hours straight on this thing, you need other things to sort of allow you to recover and allow you to relax.
Interesting. That's actually a great point. I listened to I was looking at a bunch of studies on high performers, and one of the really interesting things is that a lot of like top executives and stuff they sort of were always learning, and what I noticed even like when I went down to another category was like they were always learning music. It seemed like. And
Yeah.
so it's super interesting that you bring that up because I wonder if it just naturally makes them more effective in their day, and so that they keep it.
Yeah, music is just it's a completely different way of like the brain works. You know what I mean? It's like it's frequencies. It's like it's totally weird. There's a book called Peak, and it's really the foundational text on like focused practice, which is like you have this whole idea of the 10,000 hour rule. But the problem with the 10,000 hour rule is like you take two different people, and one person has a heightened level of awareness where they're paying attention to the details. They understand the nuanced details. They're thinking about the nuanced details. And then you have someone that just grinding their way through and just doing it by but they're not even comparable. Somebody who has deep work and they're focused on something, on the nuanced details, is going to learn way faster. And when it comes to music specifically, when someone's really plugged in and doing it, they learn way faster than someone that just going through the motions. Like when I was 10 or 11 or something, my mom gave me piano lessons for like 2 years. I don't even remember anything. I never plugged in at all. I had no interest. And so it's like that was worthless. It was a waste of, I mean, maybe not a total waste of time. Maybe my brain picked up something, but there was nothing there, you know. But if you practice the nuanced details of things, you just learn way faster. Happens in I'm a big fan of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and happens in Jiu-Jitsu a lot. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is like, man, some people learn real fast. Some people take 20 years, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that is a good point, and yeah, that focus, and I think that if you pull that layer back further, it kind of comes down to your intrinsic motivation for that thing and your interest in that thing, which is why I think it's so important to work on things that you are passionate about because I think it's like almost self-selecting. It naturally makes you focus more on the things that matter in that activity.
Yeah, it's like the philosophy of it's like attention and awareness. Like when you look at Buddhist philosophy, even Stoic philosophy to some extent is like you only have control really over your actions. You only have control over the moment. And so you might as well do this moment and this action really well. And you might as well cultivate that as the highest practice that there is, right? Presence, where you're plugged into the thing. So no matter what you're doing, no matter if even if it's the most mundane thing or it's the best, like the thing that's moving you forward in the future, you're doing that thing as best as you can possibly do it. That's the recipe for like transcendence and becoming better at anything that you want to become better at. But we're pulled continuously away from our inner thoughts, from the world, from all these things. And so the game is, how do you make yourself plugged in more frequently, better, and more focused, you know? And it's like a big thing. Like I have a meditation practice. It took me a long time also to do meditation, but meditation is the simplest possible thing you can do. It's also one of the hardest. And you're just concentrating all of the amazing power of your mind on a single thing and removing all extraneous ideas and things. And you're just there clenched with the mind muscle on one thing. That is like, when you talk about training, like training your mind, you can't really get any better than that, you know, but it's so uncomfortable. And nobody does it. Nobody wants to do it because it's really hard, and it's so simple. There's no glamour. There's no People aren't going to be awed by you. You're just sitting there in the dark with your mind thinking on something, on a singular thing, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's super interesting. And I would say, I've found what I like what you're saying there is sort of like this, how you sort of what you apply to one thing works in other areas, which like motivation, it allows you, or I'm sorry, meditation, it allows you to be more in the moment in other areas. And that muscle, this idea, it sort of is like all things. I used to, when I had my business on the outside, I caught myself wanting to like blow off stuff in the military when it was like, the reality is actually like how you do one thing is how you do all things. It's cliche as it sounds. And so I got better results in my business when I would be all in, regardless of what I was doing.
Yeah, I mean, that whole saying, how you do something or one thing is how you do everything. It's like, there's so much truth, and I mean, it's so hard, right? Like this is the game. It's like, how do you make all of the things that you're doing, like how do you plug into all of your moments? How do you stay present with all of the stuff that you're doing?
Right.
And I mean, that really is what like enlightenment is, right? Like when you're thinking about that, it's the highest levels is that stuff. And well, I'm not there yet. I don't think.
Right.
It's just.
Well, you're aware of it, and that's like a step that's ahead of most people, to be honest with you. Um, Based on all of the final question we asked, we call it the Lionheart Kicker, but based off like all of the philosophical things you've looked into, the Stoic philosophies, productivities, if you were given a microphone, we're guaranteed everybody in the world would hear what you'd say. Based off all of this stuff that you've learned, what would you tell people? What do you think is like the most, maybe the low hanging fruit for people to focus on? Or
So, I mean, in terms of like a practical thing, like something that you can do, or a mindset, but like I think the thing that you can do is the simplest is to create your a journal practice for yourself, and to cultivate that journal practice over time. That would be like the actual the physical action that you could do. And when it comes to like a mindset, I think that um, honesty, self honesty, the ability to be aware of your own biases, be aware of how you think, and to cultivate your own awareness would be the mindset. Now, the journal will actually supports the ability to cultivate awareness. So they kind of go hand in hand. But that's what I would say.
yeah, that's cool, and that's perfect. I mean, that goes along with what we're doing, and I think a lot of people that that are listening to this, if you're not benefiting from a journaling practice, like we talked about a lot of different ways. I think this was the most probably practical and applicable way I've heard, which is just a simple review process, and treating it like it's something that's only for you. That's huge as well.
Yeah, it's and one thing is there is a tendency to be thinking like that, people are going to read this, or I mean, no one's going to read it. You're doing it totally for yourself. You're doing it totally for your own benefit. And the most important element of a journal practice isn't I mean, the journaling portion is, you need that portion, but the most beneficial is in the reading and the reflection. If you do not reread your journal, you're not gonna. Who cares if you're like putting things down, just expressing these ideas? Yeah, I mean, there might be like a therapeutic benefit to that, but you're not actually going to get any better unless you actually go back, read it, reflect on the ideas, and think about how you can make changes in the future.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. That's perfect. That's great advice. For people that are listening to this, and I know we really didn't talk a lot about the level up method or anything, but for people that are listening to this and they want to follow along with you and support your journey and learn more, where can they do that?
So I have the Level Method, which is levelmethod.com is my primary company. We just do basically athletic, it's progressions, levels like martial arts. It's based on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu belts where clients get their levels and then they're able to. It's for gym owners, not for individuals. But that's my primary business. That's just levelmethod.com. I have an Instagram that I don't really use too much, and that's just Nathan Holiday. And you can go on there. I have stuff about this sort of thing, primarily the books I'm reading, but nobody cares. You know what I mean? Like I get like 6 likes on my stuff. I don't care. I'm just doing it because I want people to be exposed to these cool ideas,
Right. And I think that's the most kind of potent part of this interview is it's the way that you are approaching learning and reflecting and just organizing your life is something that I think people can really benefit from, because like we sort of talked about throughout this interview, it's like we're in this time where we're in the information age. There is you can learn how to do anything that you want. We have like a real application problem.
Totally.
Yeah, so that was great advice. Well, Nathan, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your journey with us.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to Lionheart Radio. I hope that the information from today's show will make you fitter, happier, and healthier. For the show notes of this episode and every episode, head to www.lionheartrad.io. Yep, just like Lionheart Radio. And please, if you have the time, head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us to know that we're on the right track and delivering you reliable information and value. As always, feedback is welcomed. If you have any comments on the show or would like to suggest a guest, send me an email at rick@luavive.com. That's LUAVIVE.com. Thanks for your support, and we will see you next time.
Bitch, I feel good. Don't I look stupendous? My shine is so endless, and shit you can do to end this. Even when I'm dead, niggas still gon' bump that chip shit. Coke, white, Escalade on cinches for you dipshit. So you won't forget this. Midwest nigga be the coldest. Cleveland is